Welcome to Eye of the Storm. My name is Marlon. We're filming on location at Recovery Centers of America. This show we're going to get into questions about recovery. How do I get into recovery? Why do I need recovery? What are the barriers to treatment? And we're going to talk to experts in the field who can answer these questions and get you the help that you need. On the show we have Kelsie Custodio, who's our treatment advocate in South Jersey, and she's going to talk about what her job consists of and how she's involved with people who are struggling and the families. We're also going to talk to Richey, who's the Director of Admissions and Utilization Review, and she's an expert on insurance. What does my insurance cover? Can I even come to treatment? Do I have a deductible? What are my out-of-pocket expenses? Then we're going to get into what goes on during treatment. We have Belamarich, Executive Director of the Lighthouse, and she's going to talk about the barriers of patients wanting to stay in treatment. Why do they run? What do people need to stay involved in treatment? And at the end of our show, we're going to end off with a testimonial of a patient that we had who has gone back to school, gotten his master's, and now interning at the Lighthouse. He made a serious transformation, and we're really proud of him, and we can't wait for you to hear from him. Welcome back to Eye of the Storm. Our first guest is Kelsie Custodio. Kelsie is our treatment advocate in the South Jersey area for Recovery Centers of America. So Kelsie, tell me, what is a treatment advocate?
So the job of a treatment advocate is to be as involved in the community as possible. I always say that my job is to have everyone know me, know how to connect with me, if they have questions, if they need to put someone into treatment. So just be as visible and available out in the community as possible, so that when someone does have someone that needs treatment, they have someone they can reach out to. And that would be regardless of whether they come to us or just need some guidance, maybe in even finding somewhere else if our level of care or our services, they may need something else. So I just try and have answers for everyone and everything.
Right. Do you find it that the person who's struggling is reaching out to you, or is it the family? How's that connection started?
So the families and friends of those struggling are usually willing to reach out sooner. They're reaching out first. I would say a lot less than most. You might get that person that is now homeless on the street, nowhere else to turn, no one will talk to them. If they've had a connection with you prior, they will pick up the phone. But for the most part, the calls that I'm getting are from family. Absolutely.
So talking about the family, and we'll skip over something. So tell me, what are the barriers to treatment? So you have a family on the phone, you have someone who's struggling, someone who knows somebody who's struggling. Tell me, what usually goes on? What are the excuses or the barriers to them actually getting help?
So the first thing I see normally, the first and biggest thing, is that our loved ones don't want to go into treatment because the problems that we see from one side are much clearer than the person that's caught in active addiction. They can't get a clear picture of themselves. So what happens is the families are calling, giving me information. We're trying to see if they would be appropriate for our level of care. And then I'm being told, like, they've left, they've run, they're hiding, they haven't seen them. So that's the biggest barrier. But then you get other things, which is really sad because you get stigma. People afraid to come in because they're so afraid their job will find out. They're so afraid their neighbors, their community, their church members. There's such a stigma around addiction still that it does stop people from getting help.
And what do you tell those people about stigma when they say that they're embarrassed, they don't want to come to treatment? Someone's going to find out. How are you going to protect me? What do you say to them?
So, I can explain things on the kind of the business end, like the HIPAA law and things that will protect them like that. But sometimes it's as simple as sharing with them that I'm a person in long-term recovery, sharing examples of what I thought would happen and how I thought people would view me, and actually how people viewed me once I sought help. Right. Because a lot of times what we think people are thinking of us is not necessarily how it is, and society is a lot of stigma lives in our own head. So a lot of what we end up seeing is we seek the help, we get the help, and people are proud of us. They're not ashamed of us.
Right. And what do you tell the families that love the struggling almost too much, where it's a barrier for them to come in, where they're not taking recommendations from the clinicians, they're not seeing the progression of the disease? How do you break that to them? Because I'm sure that's got to be the hardest thing. I know I've done some family work when I worked inside the Lighthouse and sat in a lot of family sessions, and I've noticed that sometimes the families are our barrier.
Oh, absolutely. And what I've learned over time is nothing I say is probably going to change their mind in the moment. But a lot of what I say will be thought of later. And so I'm used to saying, I can't do this now, or I can't get them now. Right. And then getting a call in a week saying, we have to get them in now. What should I do? Right. And so I have to have some patience sometimes.
We all have to have patience, and that's something that we all practice. We already know when a patient comes into treatment that they're going to be resistant in some way, because we're taking away their number one coping skill. And we have to meet them where they are. So, Kelsie, I know this must be really difficult when you have a case where you know what's right for the person and for the family, because it's not just for the person who's struggling, it's a family disease, and everybody needs to be educated. So I'm sure that must be a difficult moment when the family is the one that's keeping the patient from getting help, because they're either feeding them too much money, they're allowing them to do whatever they want, and they're loving them sometimes to death.
It is. So the treatment advocate role that I'm in now, I've only been in a little over a year. I come from case management. So there were a lot of times when I would have patients that I would suggest needed to continue with treatment, continue with sober living, continue with other levels of care, and the family just wanted them to come home. So I think that kind of prepared me. I can't walk in their shoes. So again, what I try and do is I try and be available to them. I give them whatever recommendations I think would be good. And then I make sure that I'm available for when they change their mind. And of course, 9 out of 10 times they do.
I'm sure.
They just have to, it's hard when you're in it. It's so easy on this side to see the whole picture.
Of course.
But they're so close, they can't clearly see it. So.
Well, I think we're all the same, where we all don't see ourselves, right? And we walk around like nothing is wrong at any time. And if something is wrong, I know with me, all of you in this building can tell when something's wrong, because I have this face, right?
Yes.
So I can't hide it. So I want to hear from Corey for a minute. So Corey, during the admission process, how many stories do you hear? I've changed my mind because I can't stay here.
That happens a good portion of the time, especially when we're seeing families bring patients into treatment. We do offer transportation for our incoming admissions, but you are allowed to have a loved one bring you in.
Right.
A lot of times people come in and they say, I've done this before. I just need to detox real quick and go home, rather than staying for a full treatment stay. Or you see them saying, I only came here because my mom said I had to. And if I tell my mom right now that I'm going to go home, she's going to take me home. And the difficult piece of that is we can't make anyone enter into treatment.
Let me ask you something. Do you feel sometimes when the loved one comes with them to treatment, they kind of co-sign the excuse right away? Or are the parents ready to hold the line once they get inside the treatment center?
So I find that when we are with the patient, providing the support with the family, they're willing to hold the line.
Okay.
But once you kind of let them be alone and talk about the decision that they need to make and really admitting and committing to the treatment, it's a lot easier for them to break down the barriers.
So we eliminate a lot of smoke breaks during the admission process.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we eliminate a lot of those.
So for the most part, like I said before, patients are usually resistant to this. But I would say to anybody out there that's struggling, give it a chance. And I know once you first come in, this is not something that you feel is for you, or you can come up with a line, I am not like anybody else in here. I come from a different background, or I have a job and I know what I'm doing. You know, the reality of things is if your life is unmanageable because you can't stop with a substance that's keeping you away from the public and you can't produce as a functioning member of society, it's time for you to make a change. And we know that all of you have it in you to do this, so just take a chance. So Kelsie, when you're out in the community, what kind of community events are you doing to not only attract people to come into treatment, but what are we doing for the community to show that we are a resource and we're a partner to our local communities, and not asking for things, just what can we do?
Right. So there's a lot of things that we actually, you talked about not asking for things. There's a lot of things that we actually sponsor. And those are always the things that bring us closer to the community. Like I, for one, I love sponsored community events and the things where it's not people in treatment. It's not, just businesses. It's the community as a whole. So recently we did the Stop the Heroin Walk that was up on the boardwalk, and what that did was it raised money to help those leaving treatment afford sober living housing. So a lot of times people are coming out of treatment.
Tell us about what sober living is.
So sober living is just like, so a lot of people can't go home or shouldn't go home. Mostly it shouldn't go home because the environment that they come from is a trigger for picking up again. And so going into a house that's monitored, house managers, they're all run a little differently. But, and there's all different kind of levels, from very, very structured to more self-governed houses. But, and people, what they'll do is they'll begin going into outpatient treatment. They can start to work. So, but that initial payment to get into a house, sometimes someone coming out of treatment doesn't have it. So, there's a lot of fundraisers involved to raise monies to support people coming out of treatment and going into housing till they can get on their own feet.
What other community events are you involved with?
So down here in Atlantic County, we also work very closely with Eric Scheffler and the Hope One van, which is out in the community all the time, providing services to those seeking information. We have those in the community that will come and see them for Narcan. They are a community resource for referring into treatment.
And how did the Hope One get started?
So I know that Eric Scheffler, you could probably tell me more about the Hope One than I know.
So
I know Eric Scheffler is the one. It was his dream, his mission, his passion.
Who is Eric Scheffler?
Eric Scheffler is the Atlantic County sheriff. And if he has another title, I don't know about it.
I just want everybody to know who he is.
Yes,
and what
Sheriff
his...
Eric Scheffler. And if you've ever heard him speak, you can hear, you don't need necessarily the words that he says, you can hear the passion that he has for people struggling with addiction and substance use disorders. And that's where, like, I'm drawn to people that want to help this population. And as far as just getting it started, like I said, you probably have a little more information than I do.
Well, I just know what the mission is for the Hope One project, and I think that it's such a wonderful thing that the sheriff is doing by allowing people to access treatment instead of serving time in jail. So if there is a warrant, and I'm not saying if it's a violent crime, but if it's a drug crime or it's shoplifting or things like that, if you access treatment, he goes to the judge and has that warrant vacated. You have to follow all levels of care, and he works directly with us, and he's got a very close relationship with Kelsie where he can call her and say, look, I have a case. I'm not sure that he can come to Recovery Centers of America. I'm not sure where he can go. I don't know what kind of mental health. Can you assess him? And What Kelsie does is really just take over and make the family feel better and go through all of the insurance, go through what he's struggling with, and have professionals take a look. So it's our connection from the community, from someone who's struggling, going to a nonprofit community-based program, to Kelsie, and then we have options, which I think is a great plan for people who don't have anything.
Yes.
And I'm just like you, and Corey's the same way. We want to help people whether they have or they don't.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the most important thing. So any educational things that you're assisting with?
So right now I am in the process of partnering with LEAD, and LEAD is law enforcement against drugs.
Okay.
And it is what used to be kind of the replacement for DARE. If anyone remembers DARE back in the day, there is no more DARE. There is LEAD. And what they're doing is they're going into the community and giving educational, like seminars, lectures. I hate to say lectures when you're talking about kids, but they're giving presentations to children. They're finding it to be very successful. And I know that David Dorshu, our CEO, and I have spoken. And so, like I said, we're in the process of partnering with them, because that's the kind of stuff we want to be a part of.
Absolutely. So how do you find Kelsie? So we're gonna put her name and her phone number and her email up on the screen, because there are people out there that have questions that they don't know if treatment's for them. They don't know why they're even watching this at this point. But if you are watching this, there probably is an issue, and maybe you need to talk to Kelsie. So her name is Kelsie Custodio, and her phone number is 856-392-4946, or Custodio, Custodio, at recoverycoa.com. If you're struggling out there and you just don't know what to do, don't wait around. Make the phone call. If you don't want to talk to Kelsie, you can call 1-800-RECOVERY. We have people out there to help you. Don't wait around, and this is your time. Embrace it. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Corey Richey, our Director of Admissions in UR, and we're going to talk about insurance. How can you use your insurance? Do I have out-of-pocket expenses? Why am I so afraid to make the phone call? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Eye of the Storm. Our next guest is Corey Richey. She's our Director of Admissions in UR, and we're going to ask her the tricky questions about insurance, which I am no expert, but she is. So, Corey, I know you see a lot of policies. There are people who call in who have term policies. They'll swear that everything is active, that they met their deductible, and I don't know what you're talking about. So, because I've heard some of the conversations that go on in that office. So tell me, how do you use your insurance, and how do you even know if you can come to this kind of level of care?
So everybody's insurance policy is a little bit different. Even if you have a Horizon policy, not all Horizons are the same. So I think the biggest thing that people need to understand about their insurance policies is, number one, just because you have coverage doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to use it for the level of care that you want.
Okay.
The way I generally like to explain it to people is you can't walk into an ER and say, I want an x-ray, and say, well, I didn't hurt myself, I just want one. So you have to prove that you need the level of care that you are requesting.
What is UR?
So UR is utilization review, and that's the department that talks to the insurance company and makes the case that you need this treatment and fights for people to be here. And I think that is a really kind of important behind the scenes thing that a lot of people don't see, because a lot goes into it. Sometimes we're getting 2 and 3 days at a time for people that we're trying to keep here for 30 days. So you figure if you're getting 2 to 3 days at a time, you're reviewing that case 10 to 15 times while they're in treatment with us. And It's a little bit challenging because sometimes it can feel like your insurance company doesn't want you to be here. But that's why we kind of take care of all of that for the patients when they're here. What I hear a lot is, I have great coverage.
Right.
What do you mean I'm not approved to be here? Or I've already been approved to be here. And the first step that we take when you call the 1-800-RECOVERY number is verifying your benefits. What that means is your policy is active and you can come into treatment. The second step is that utilization review portion where you're actually getting the authorization to be in treatment.
So let me ask you a question. So when we're talking about coming into treatment and they're saying, well, you have a deductible on your policy, and when you're done, there's a certain out-of-pocket max that you have to cover. We are an in-network provider, but depending on your policy, there is still a deductible or a possible out-of-pocket. What is that all about? What does all that mean?
So if you kind of break it down from biggest to smallest, because that's the way it makes the most sense. So your out-of-pocket max is the most amount of money you will ever pay for your insurance policy during that calendar year.
Okay.
So that is the end-all be-all. So you could have an out-of-pocket max of $6,000, say. What goes into that out-of-pocket max is all the other pieces of insurance. So some policies have a deductible. What that is a dollar amount that needs to be hit before your insurance will cover any part of your treatment.
Okay.
So if you have a $2,000 deductible, we would bill your insurance. They would approve the contracted rate because we are an in-network provider with most insurances. And then you would be responsible up to $2,000 until anything else kicks in.
Let me ask you another question. Is this any different from a hospital?
The only difference is there are certain plans that have carve-outs for mental health.
Okay.
And what that would mean is that while you may have, I'll say Horizon again, just because that's what a lot of people around here have, you may have a Horizon insurance and then your mental health benefit carves out through United Healthcare. So what that would mean is that you can use your medical benefits at the hospital with your Horizon, but if you went to anywhere that was substance abuse treatment, it would be through United Healthcare.
So explain what is a mental health benefit.
So a mental health benefit...
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. What is a mental health benefit, and can you add a mental health benefit to your policy?
So what a mental health benefit is that you're basically just making sure, whether it's through your employer when you're doing open enrollment, or if you're purchasing a policy off the healthcare exchange, you're making sure that the plan you're electing reports that you have coverage for substance abuse and mental health. Not every plan does. Not every employer offers it. Most do these days just because it is such an epidemic, whether it be substance abuse, mental health issues. You know, the world is riddled with anxiety these days. So most plans do have that benefit. But you have to make sure it's not covered under just medical.
So if a person comes in and they want to admit, but they don't have the money for their deductible, I know that in RCA we do have what's called FinPay. Can you explain what that is?
So FinPay is a financing option for people coming into treatment. And what we do with that is you make a small down payment, and then they would approve a payment plan for whatever your estimated cost is. The way it works is that it's no interest, nothing like that. It's just somebody who's going to say every month, hey, you owe us X amount of money, so that you don't have to pay it all up front. You can pay it back later. The other thing they do with that is that, say your out-of-pocket cost was less than we had originally estimated, they'll adjust it so that your payments could go down monthly, or you pay it for a less amount of time. But they actively work with the call center and with admissions when patients come in to make sure that they can set up a payment plan that works for them.
So if anybody's listening out there, what would you tell them if their barrier is the insurance or lack of knowledge? What would you say?
So I would say the first step, if you are struggling with insurance, is we do have people at 1-800-RECOVERY who can help walk you through all of the insurance benefits, what your coverage looks like, what level of care you may meet criteria for. But they also can reach out to their HR departments, or if they're not comfortable doing that, because like Kelsie said, there's a lot of stigma around that, you can reach out directly to your insurance company. On the back of your card, there is a specific one that says for mental health, substance abuse, or for behavioral health. You can call that number and you can say, where can I go? How can I get help? what is it going to cost me?
So if you're listening out there, it just takes a phone call to get the process started. There's a lot of issues on insurance, a lot of questions that people have. Every time I have to go to a doctor, I wonder, what am I going to have to pay? And nobody at the doctor's office is going to explain that to me. So like Corey said, there is a number on the back of your insurance card where there's a customer service line that will answer your questions, at least about what you're responsible for. If you're worried about not being able to come into treatment or you don't know anything about it, we have a 1-800-RECOVERY line that's open 24/7, and everybody is trained on answering the questions that are out there. Why can't I get into treatment? Or I just can't afford it anyway. If you're in the community and you're reaching out, Kelsie is out there waiting to answer those questions. We're out there to help you. Everybody that works here is genuinely invested in this. We've become soldiers, and we worry when you don't make that phone call. And I know, Kelsie, when I was the patient advocate, you're case management, and we would always worry when we discharged a patient and we didn't hear from them. What's going to happen to that person? And no matter how busy the admission department is, you get those talks. Even Dawn, the executive director, runs all through this building, and every once in a while you see her just sitting at her desk. Where is this patient? How come I haven't heard from that one? And it's a genuine concern for us because we can't do anything unless we know where you are or you're actually willing to let us help you. So I would say, if you can see it in all of us, that all we want you to do is try. Come in and let us do the rest. And I know that people don't want to be put in a facility, but I'll tell you, if you're here for a little while and then you see the care that goes on here, all you have to do is stay. The light will go off. Let us help you. When we come back, we're going to bring Dawn Belamarich, our executive director for Lighthouse, and she's going to answer questions on why patients don't want to stay in treatment, why they get antsy, what are their barriers, and how can we help them. And then we're going to hear from Nick Geisler, who's going to give a testimonial, and he lived it. He lived the story and still living it and doing fantastic. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Eye of the Storm. Our next guest is Dawn Belamarich. She's our Executive Director for Recovery Centers of America at Lighthouse, and we're going to talk about the barriers to patients while they're in treatment. What goes on and why people can't sit still. So Dawn, tell me, what are the barriers to patients in treatment?
So for some of our patients coming in, they're brought here by loved ones or significant others, so this isn't always their favorite place or their first place that they want to be. So there are times when they're in treatment where they want to leave or, where they have trouble just with their detox protocol or with some of the rules that are going on. So there are some struggles that our patients have, but our goal here is to motivate and encourage the best we can to keep them in treatment.
So during the admission process, what are the different kinds of drugs that are coming through the door now?
So we do have, opiates, which you hear about pretty much predominantly on the news with the epidemic. So oxycodone, heroin. We do have other patients that use meth. We have patients that use marijuana, cocaine, benzos, so any painkillers, any drugs like that. It really depends on that individual. Alcohol is obviously a primary substance that patients come in abusing. We're seeing a lot of patients that are abusing multiple substances. And obviously with the introduction of something as lethal as fentanyl, we're seeing that a lot more laced in some of the substances that they're using on a daily basis.
And a lot of the patients that come in feel that they're using heroin and they're not.
Right. So some of the drugs they're getting are obviously laced with something else or a combination of things. So they think that they're purchasing one thing or using one thing, and in fact, they're using multiple things or something with an additive.
When we talk about how dangerous it is nowadays because the fentanyl sometimes is a one and done.
Right.
So what do you tell your patients or the families when they come in and now they've gotten their results back and it's straight fentanyl?
I think a lot of it goes to education for our patients. So clearly now, if a patient wants to leave treatment or is super, super motivated to get out of here, the dialogue we have with them is that people aren't returning and that unfortunately your next use could be your last use. There's a lot of different education internally too, because when a patient's tolerance is down, like it would be when they come in for inpatient treatment, that first use could be potentially lethal because their body isn't used to them picking up. So there's an education with the patient, but then there's also that education with the family and loved ones. This is why we need you to motivate them to stay. This is really, what you're helping them work towards. And unfortunately, this is the nature of drug addiction right now. One use could be the last use.
So we talk about, why people use street drugs and you don't know what you're getting. Nowadays, you really don't know what you're getting. And you think that you're using a substance that you thought that this was what you started with, and you end up with a substance that could kill you right away. So I would say when you come into treatment, let's try to make this the last time around because it might not be another time that you'll get, we talk about as you leave treatment, even if you complete a program, your body is at a different point. So when you introduce that strong drug, what happens?
So I just think, people don't understand that when they're using a certain, just say a couple bags of heroin when they come in per day, tolerance is exactly what it is. Your body's used to a certain amount to kind of even you out or get that high that you're working to achieve. And when that tolerance is decreased or essentially diminished because you're in inpatient treatment for a while, and you go out and use the same amount thinking that that's what you used prior to coming in, it's oftentimes can be an overdose situation or potential, lethal. So those are really things that unfortunately nowadays we have to educate people on. And the same with alcohol and other drugs of abuse. Anything can be abused to the point of being lethal, unfortunately. Some things may take longer.
Right.
But it's just really that educational piece for everyone to understand, it's not addiction 20 years ago where you go out and maybe you come back for a second or third treatment. For a lot of our patients, unfortunately, that is not an option.
So we talk a lot about the opiates and the fentanyl, but we don't talk a lot about alcohol. And we're seeing a lot more alcohol these days. And I know I've run into a lot of people out there that are elderly. Over 60 years old, over 70 years old. And the line that I get is, I've been drinking for 50 years. How long should I live? And I don't know if I can handle a detox. What do you say to people that give you that and say, I can't come into treatment because of these things?
I think one of the main factors you run into with an alcohol is that it's legal. So, that especially if you're talking about an older, maybe geriatric population, it's something that has been legal their entire lives that they may have done socially, but now they're completely dependent on.
Right.
And I think the message really at that point, if it's not to that individual, but to the loved one, is that if this is, really diminishing your ability to function, and it's in the way of your life and your relationships and everything that you love to do or historically love to do, then maybe getting help is an option.
So what age groups are you seeing coming into treatment these days?
So we see ages 18, we have adults in our facility, but we'll see them from 18 all the way up. It really just depends. There's different trends and themes at different times. So sometimes you might have predominantly older population or predominantly younger one. At any given time, though, I would say it's probably a 65 to 70% male to female. But again, right now we have a larger amount of females in treatment. So, but I would say overall, and it's really, it just shows you ultimately that the disease of addiction doesn't discriminate.
And can we talk about gender separation within the population?
Sure. So
this is a great topic for us.
So our programming internally is separated by gender, which means that there are groups specific for our female population and groups specific for our male population. And really why we do that is to essentially reduce as many distractions as possible. So males are able to openly share about issues and information that they would feel more comfortable in front of other males sharing about, and females can then do the same. We do have opportunities for them to have joint groups at some point throughout the day as well, so they're not totally isolated and separated. But really, the gender-separated programming ensures that for the time our patients are here, they're able to focus on what they need to.
So let's talk about patient elopements and patients getting what we call squirrely in treatment, right? And I know I've done several blocks, and we've done some together, and we'll talk about Nick in a minute. And we'll talk about why people don't want to stay. What do you say to them? And why do people don't want to stay?
I mean, I say a lot of different things.
I know, I've heard a lot of them.
But it's really whether an individual is realizing when they want to leave or not that they want to use, that is the number one motivating factor.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be they're going home to use that night or pick up that night, but the behaviors behind that are always leading back to the same thing, unfortunately. And, it's been a rare occurrence in my experience where someone feeds into that impulse of leaving and doing what they want to do and not following recommendations, where there isn't the potentiality for a relapse. And really, we leverage everything we can, which is why the family and the loved one support is essential, which is why the peer support within the patient community is important. But the answer to that is whatever it takes. Our patients, sometimes they are not ready to be done. A 19-year-old may not be ready to stop drinking for the rest of their life. That's a very daunting idea.
So, Nick, I'm going to ask you a question because I want to hear from your perspective of being inside a treatment center, not really wanting to be here, and really doing it for your family in the beginning. Because we've had several conversations while you were inside, and, the look that you had when we started the conversations and the look that you had actually when you started to think about you was a little different. So tell me, when we were trying to block you or tell you, hey, Nick, you're worth it. We want to love you until you can love yourself. And you basically wanted to tell me go away, and just do this to me. And like, oh, God, here he comes again. And I know I was doing that to you. Yeah. But I want you to know I did it because I felt that it was necessary. Not because I wanted to annoy you. Yeah. And Dawn does it because, I think she enjoys annoying people. Mm-hmm. But, I think that the end result for all of us is just to make you see that you're worth it.
Sure.
So how did you feel when we were doing this to you?
So I think the funny part about all this is I remember driving down here with my father and like being in the car and saying like, this time I'm really going to do it for myself.
Okay.
Like I'm going to do the aftercare, whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to follow through with it. And then like 2 weeks into it, you approach me and it's like, what are we doing afterwards? Mm-hmm. And like, I just was going to go home and do an IOP and keep doing what I was doing. But it was all based out of fear.
Okay.
Fear of someone else trying to, what I thought was dictate what I needed to do. Didn't see that it was like the best intention. And it was just wanting to continue to run my own show with it. And the staff here constantly was just like, Nick, get out of your way, get out of your way. And, one of the RSs, I remember telling me, he's like, have you hit your knees lately? Mm. Said no. And, that night, I pray and meet with you the next day and like everything was completely different.
So I want you to know when I asked you if I can come into the family session that day, I knew that you didn't like that I did that. And I knew that I was still somewhat of a stranger to you.
Sure.
But I get direction from the staff. Like they tell me, listen, this guy needs this. Like I'm not a clinician. I'm an advocate for recovery, and I just want you to guide you to the right place so you can dig in. But the staff here would not leave it alone, just so you know. And that's what we do here. We treat every case individually, and no one gets the same treatment because everybody's different. And I want you to know we did that because we wanted to see the end result. And we're going to talk about the end result and where you ended up. This is the best part of things for us is that we wait for the call that the person's okay, doing well, or the person is in the field and they're helping others, or the person just loves themselves, and that's the thing that most people don't. They don't love themselves anymore and they don't know how. So, Dawn, I'm sure that's the best part of it because I know you get that grin just like I do. Like, you're not going to believe who called me. And, that's the emotion that we show openly. Like, this is it. Like, the person has got 30 days. He's got 60 days.
Yep.
To us, that's a milestone. And even if a person comes into treatment and they do relapse, but each time they come in, they stay a little longer, they learn a little more, they're open to something else, that's success for us. Mm-hmm. So, Dawn, tell me, do you love your job?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me why.
I think you just pointed it out more than anything, probably. We always talk about when our patients come in for admission and seeing maybe at that the low of lows. But even 28, 30 days out, or in Nick's case. I get to see him all of the time. Seeing like that light come back in someone's face and that hope essentially is what it is. Hope that there's a way out, hope that I have a life outside this, hope that there's going to be days where I'm challenged or I'm anxious or I'm whatever, but really just hope for their future. That when they come in, we don't really say. It's probably the greatest feeling in the entire world.
I feel the same way. I mean, this is the only job that I think I've ever had that I can't wait to go to work. I don't mind answering the phone, even if it's 2 a.m. I don't care if it's on a Sunday, because maybe I can help. I could say one thing that'll bring that person to health. And that's what we all do. We're all mediators for God, right? We all say, well, somebody got my number for a reason. How did they get my number? Who cares how they got my number? How can I help them? And then we go through every little thing that's on their mind until they're safe in a bed. So Nick, tell me, I want to know, how do you feel now? Like look at what you've been through. Like I can't tell you just how proud I am to even be part of the process. And mine was a small process. I mean, it's the whole team that got involved with you, and look at what you're doing now. So why don't you tell us what's going on with you?
I mean, it's first off, just grateful to be able to sit here, and actually call you a friend, a colleague, someone I can turn to when I need to talk about something. It's pretty wild to think of where I'm sitting today.
Yeah. We all knew it. We did.
I appreciate that. Sitting in treatment, fighting aftercare, and finally taking the suggestion to go to a structured sober living down in Ventnor, called Surfside Structured Sober Living.
You have to get that plug in there.
Had to plug it. Really, I thought I was a grown man. I thought I knew how to run my life. I thought I knew what it took and steps to take. And the reality is I didn't know anything. I was just a scared little boy trapped in, an adult body. But going through opening up here with the staff and the therapist that I had, and then going through this program, it's, allowed me to live a life that I'm proud to say that I'm living. I'm currently finishing up my master's in mental health counseling. Doing my internship here. So
he's back to the lighthouse.
That's right.
Where he started doing an internship right here.
Never escape.
While doing that, I'm employed by Surfside now as well. We're kind of like what Kelsey's doing. I'm out community outreach and helping the communities know there is help. And, being a living proof of recovery is possible. Recovery is fun. It's a life worth living.
I'm so happy to hear from you. I mean, this is the best part of it for us, that you've made that full circle, and then now you're going to actually help somebody else. And there's no one that's going to tell you anything that you haven't been through. So no one can say you don't know how I feel. You know what I mean? I mean, I just think it's fantastic, and I want to commend you for all the things that you've done.
Thanks, Marlon.
So
me too. We're very proud of you.
So on our next show, we're going to talk about human trafficking, things that people don't know about or they choose not to think about. One of our dynamic counselors, Joni Whalen, is the president of this foundation, and we're going to get into what happens to girls out there, what happens to boys out there when they're not attended to. If they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, there are people out there looking to prey on the weak. How do we support this kind of a foundation? What donations can we give them so they could stay alive? They've been given a church of their own to work out of, and she's doing some fantastic work. So I can't wait to let everybody see through the eyes of someone who's been abducted, through the eyes of someone who runs a program like that. This is a serious topic, and it's something that everybody needs to hear, because there are similar topics out there that people just don't discuss or they don't want to be involved in. So I would say stay tuned for the next show. It's going to get interesting. This is Eye of the Storm. My name is Marlon. Thank you for listening.